Hi, everybody. It's Victor Agreda, and this week on Coders, we've got a really cool show where we're going to be talking about game design and game development primarily. So join us in just a minute.
Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com.
Hey, everybody. It's Victor Agreda. This week on Coders, we're talking about game development, and I'm joined here with a local game developer, Ryan Waller. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And Ryan, we've talked a number of times before. First of all, just tell us what's the name of your company and what games have you guys made?
Sure. Forthright Entertainment, and our best known title is probably Fake Colors, which is on the Steam store. We've done a lot of mobile games. Nothing I would say is a huge success, but we are making money and surviving, so that's worth something.
That's good. And you guys are working on a new game, right?
We are working on Thunder God Battles. We're on the final stage of development, and then pre-development on Zombie Hunters into Darkness.
Wow, excellent. Okay, so it's always interesting to me that where I'm based, which is Knoxville, Tennessee, we've got some game developers and whatnot, but this is one of those things where it's also a global phenomenon, and you work with a team that's spread out across the world, right?
I do. We have about 3 guys here and locally, and then we have a total of 17 total team members. Now, some of that's very minimal to like contract work, like doing sound and audio, to some extensive stuff like our UI guys in Macedonia, and he's really good. So it's interesting how interconnected the community is.
What do you guys use to communicate with each other? Do you use Slack or Skype or whatever?
Sure. We use Skype. Skype for Business now, is what it's called. But yeah, we have found it to be the most effective tool for us, because in some of the countries that we work with, my lead programmer is in Algeria. There's some limited access, which is interesting. I wasn't quite aware of how much countries throttle certain things.
Sure.
So that was about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a big awakening for me of like, oh wow, I live in America. I'm pretty lucky.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that is something definitely that our audience, I think, would understand, is the fact that telecom across the world is sort of different in different places. I mean, you've got infrastructure issues in places like Algeria. That's a completely different infrastructure scene than we've got here in America, right? Or in Europe or whatever. So you have to work around those things, right?
It's interesting though. We had one of our games, which is a little like a match game. It's Thunder God matches, and one of our biggest markets was in Tanzania. And it's interesting because I did a little research, and they literally there's tribal people that literally live in what you consider like African tribes. No electricity, no power, yet they have smartphones, and they send a kid in that charges it takes like 20 phones and charges them in town on a bike, and then comes back. Like, it's insane.
That's pretty amazing.
It's definitely the old world and new world colliding. So in gaming, I think unites all of that, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that goes to the whole idea of like what Google and Facebook are trying to do, which is connect the world, because what they've seen is commerce and economic development is spurred by mobile growth, right? So you extend mobile into these areas that, like you said, had no infrastructure, and then all of a sudden they're able to do things that they were never able to do before.
Yeah, Nigeria is an interesting case because it's a very growing economy in a lot of ways, and of course it has the oil, but there is a game studio that made the first like African-based theme game, and the hero's African, and that's, as a game developer, as an artist, that's just really cool to see. 10, 15 years ago, that would have never happened.
Absolutely, yeah.
That talent wouldn't have had the opportunity. So things like Google and Facebook are doing, telecommunications in general, uniting things. It's really an interesting time.
Yeah, well, and you're not beholden to making CDs and then distributing those. I mean, that was the big stumbling block. I remember, and of course, Knoxville actually was the home of a company called Cyberflix back in the 90s, and they pioneered the CD-ROM game genre. I can't remember the name of their first CD-ROM game. It was a shooter. It was very weird. But the big one that a lot of people were
Cyber.
I had it. Something. I know. Well, we'll remember at some point. But their big one that people probably remember is Titanic. And they did an amazing job of modeling the Titanic. So good, in fact, that James Cameron, when he made the movie Titanic, asked them for their 3D assets because they'd done such a great job of mapping everything on the inside.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. And so, we kind of have a little bit of a history of game development here in town. So speaking of game development, let's talk a little bit about the other tools that you guys use. So what is it that you guys use primarily for actually creating the games themselves?
Sure. So I was kind of go through the process of game development real quickly. if you're getting into game development, one of the number one things you need to learn about is what we like to call the building block or the game design document. Basically, that creates the structure for your game. So every element, as a producer, that's very important. And producers in any field, television, film, game, it's the same thing. How do I put all these pieces together to tell my story or to finish my project? So we start with the game design document, and you can use all kinds. There's templates, there's tools online. You can use Notepad. I mean, so
the main thing is that it's like this is all of the elements that are going to be in this game, and here's how they fit together.
Yeah, it's your path basically. It's your build path. And then you have what's going to go over UI, sound, 3D modeling, programming. So kind of your core, and then networking if it's a multiplayer based game. So we like to use. Let me back up. If we're talking indie or small, there's some basic tool sets that everyone uses. Blender is a great recommended tool for any kind of art asset. And even you can use Windows Paint. I mean, like Microsoft Paint. I mean, I've seen people do stuff like that. So,
and Blender is it's a free tool. It's a 3D tool.
It's great. I mean, and there's so much tutorial. You can YouTube. Pretty much any software you can YouTube and find a tutorial on. So, but we use Photoshop for most of our 2D based art assets, especially our UI. That's pretty common. Then we also use for modeling, we use ZBrush. And we have Modo, so we have a combination depending on what we're doing. There's some different things we use. And then you can rig and animate. Blender even allows you to do that, although not as effectively as like 3D Max or some other things. But so we use those two tools primarily, and then we also program. We use Unity and Unreal Engine for the two things that we're working on. And there's a plethora of tools that you can be using. So, but that's our core stuff that we function in.
Okay. Well, and I know we had been talking earlier about Unity, and Unity has become such a ubiquitous tool for game developers. Talk a little bit about why that is. I mean, I know that there's a pricing model thing, right? Yeah. So basically, you can download it for free, and you can use it, and you can actually deploy on PC and Mac, I think, right?
PC, Mac, Windows Phone, Windows Store, because there's a difference.
On Windows 10, it's a little more fluid in Windows 10, kind of, sort of. But
but they gave that for free. So now you do have the Unity splash screen, which is fine.
Yeah.
Right? But you can sell your product and make. They don't take any revenue or anything of that.
Right.
So as anybody wants to make a game, there's a gentleman that I'm friends with, and I don't know if I have the freedom to say his name. He literally just got into this and started making games on his own. He was a 2D art guy, and he has made quite a bit of money now. And he's an indie developer. He's a one-man studio.
Wow.
So,
and that's very rare, though, right? To have a one-man studio.
Well, Unity. The reason I was saying that is Unity gives you the ability to have all these assets. They have a thing called the asset store, and their asset store has free things and reasonably priced, amazing assets that if I was to go out and develop from scratch, would cost me thousands of dollars in many cases.
Right.
So that's, I think, one of the benefits of Unity is the free deployment, the tier pricing structure. So if I want the Pro version of Unity, or I want the Android version or the iOS version, I can buy those in segments, or I can even pay a monthly fee. So it's really accessible to a lot of people.
That's
excellent.
And
then the asset store moves it into a whole other level.
Yeah. And by contrast, how is Unreal priced?
So Unreal takes 5% off the top of whatever you make. And you also still have to get your approval. They're mainly for console development. That's a AAA gaming title. They would argue you could do non-AAA, and you can.
Sure,
correct.
Yeah, of course.
But I would recommend Unity for that. But and you can do AAA in Unity too. So, but Unreal definitely does that more. They have their asset store is very limited. So at the current moment, that could change. It is changing. They're getting stuff on. They're being aggressive about it. But I mean, the Unreal licensing, when I first applied for licensing, was $250,000 per seat.
Wow.
And a seat is one computer. If you guys don't know.
Yeah.
So you look at it today, and here, have it for free.
Yeah.
Have a tool that 5 years ago was $250,000 per seat. Have it for free. We'll take 5% off the top. So they've really added, and they have some other stuff for hiring studios. There's some different pricing that's not public, but they have some agreements on like that. But overall,
interesting. So if you are getting started with development, and particularly with the coding aspect of it, what should you look at? What should you learn to really get your fingers dirty with the coding of these actual things?
It's a great question, and they're going to tell you different stuff.
Yeah,
I'll give you the three that are the most common, which is Java, C#, C++. So C# gives you more power that would be really where I would probably start in Java. It's a simpler language if you want to learn something. Unity allows you to do JavaScript or C. So
Okay. Yeah, well, we had talked. I was on another one of our shows yesterday, and we had actually talked about JavaScript, and particularly, on the web. Obviously, JavaScript started as a web, language, and it's funny because a lot of us thought that JavaScript was kind of going to go away, but then you had a lot of backend tools start using it. Node.js is a good example of that. So makes my mind kind of real is the fact that JavaScript, and I learned JavaScript from WebMonkey, if you remember that
I
site,
do
right?
remember
Yeah,
Monkey.
yeah. So
Is that still around?
Oh, they brought it back. I'm not sure if it's still
I
alive
thought it went
now.
away for a while.
Yeah, it went away. They brought it back. I don't think it's doing well now, but it's amazing because, I mean, of course, like you said, YouTube, you can find so many tutorials for JavaScript stuff.
Let me make a plug.
Yeah.
I have, for my guys, I bought an enterprise version for digitaltutors.com. They literally cover basically any software, and they don't have a game design section specifically, but you can think of any of the top 60, 70 major softwares. They have it.
Wow.
So
that's excellent.
you can get a subscription for as cheap as $30 a month.
Okay.
Or the certificate setting, so you can get certificates issued by them for $50.
That's amazing. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that the cost of doing things has dropped so dramatically. Not just the development tools, but the learning tools themselves. I mean, it used to be you would have to go to a computer science class, you'd have to go to a 4-year university,
Well, before that, when I first got interested in gaming, you had to find someone who had done gaming.
Hey, that's true.
Literally,
there were no programs or anything
nothing.
like that. Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, I worked on helping deploy at our local ITT Tech a game development course. And, the question was, well, are there jobs here for this? And it's like, the thing about game development is that a lot of the jobs, oddly enough, are localized, like Los Angeles or San Francisco, something like Seattle. It's like bigger cities. But I saw already, and this was before the iPhone App Store even, it's like I knew that this was going to be distributed over time. One of the things that I always took my students to, because I taught some Flash courses as well, was Newgrounds. And for those of you who don't remember Newgrounds, I mean, it's still around. It's still kicking barely. You could just like Flash is still kicking kind of. But one of the cool things about Newgrounds is that people would actually put on there experimental stuff, things that they were tinkering with and whatnot. And, Flash as a tool, and this is still the case, it's like it's actually a pretty cool prototyping tool. If you want to just sketch something out and try things and whatnot and apply some physics to it, it's actually pretty easy to do that kind of thing. So I think that the point I'm making is that, that's, what do you say, $30 a month or something, right?
Yeah,
that's super cheap
for the entire, and it's like professionally trained.
Yeah.
They have assets you can even download with a $50 one and employ into it. So it's very well done. There's other sites like them. We use them. The customer service in from them has been amazing. So that's something for me that we have found to be very beneficial.
Yeah.
And I recommend I've had a lot of other developers that come in and said, I don't really know how to use this program. Go to Digital Tutors.
Right.
So
how do you guys distribute your games? I know Steam is one of those, right?
Steam, of course, the App Store. So you have Windows Phone, the Google Play. Samsung is Android. So a couple Android app stores. Amazon, of course, Google Play, Samsung. In the Asian markets, there's even some other ones as well. We're on Ouya.
Poor Ouya.
Well, they got bought out by a Chinese company that actually maybe has a lot of potential. So
that's good.
And then, of course, iOS. So we deploy through that. And we've been inquired about deploying physical-based discs for some retailers. Currently, that's not a platform I'm interested in. For our business model.
Well, it's a higher overhead, right?
Yeah.
And and I think for a lot of our watchers that are in the telecom industry, how have you seen mobile transform the game industry?
It's transformed everything.
Yeah.
The connectivity, it's what made the price. It's what caused the pricing points to drop. As it became more accessible to the world, the global economy kicked in. Its competitive nature, it's been very, very beneficial. So mobile has transformed the way that people access and connect. Think about Candy Crush, the social aspect of sending friend requests or sending friend items. So we could have a whole show on that. But just the connectivity, I think, and the exposure has forced pricing down, which has enabled more people to access it, and more people to develop, and more people to learn.
But there's a double-edged sword to that too, because as the pricing model has changed, developers who are creating these things who do have teams and they've got to feed those people, like that's a problem for you guys. You have to look at kind of selling more and doing more with less, right?
Yeah. Actually, pretty much right now in the gaming industry, 5% people are making money, 80% are doing nothing, 10, 15% are breaking even. So
Yeah.
It's a tough market right now to be in.
Yeah. But the upside to that is that for gamers, there's never been more games available. There've never been more incredible games out there, and games that are made, on a shoestring budget.
The push of indie titles, the creativity that's allowed because there's not a major studio that's forcing.
Yeah.
You and I could sit down and create a game in 3 days, have an idea for a game, and then implement that. And this original idea. And you think about some of the big. Sony's done a good job picking a lot of the really good indie titles up on the PlayStation.
I noticed that. Yeah.
There's been some really good stuff out there lately. So
it makes me sad because that's the only console I don't have.
I don't own it either. I have I have a television even.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Well, and I saw the Darth Vader edition PS4 that they've got, so I'm kind of like, okay, maybe for Christmas.
Battlefront.
Yeah, Battlefront. I mean, and that looks amazing. Of course, we could have a whole show on games that we're really chomping at the bit, like the new Fallout.
Nordic nations, man.
Yeah,
they're producing so much amazing stuff right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's one other thing too, and I think we'll actually wrap it up on that, is with mobile devices becoming more and more powerful, how do you see that versus the other problem is in the telecom world, balancing bandwidth, and balancing the needs,
the spectrum.
Exactly. So you think that's going to be a problem down the road? Because people, 4 gig download for a game or something on their phone.
Microsoft has just developed, I want to say it was at USC, some California university, I don't remember off the top of my head right now, a way basically to break up the data so it's so much less, using of the spectrum.
Oh, wow.
So they're working on a way that will revolutionize the way that data is streamed through. So, but the telecommunication companies are doing a really good job of figuring out how do we break this data and make it tighter and more compact. Kind of like what zip files do, basically.
Sure.
How do we do that within our bandwidth?
Yeah.
Within our spectrum. So.
Well, and I can say also that Apple is working on it. It should be deployed with iOS 9, but you never know. There's a lot of stuff that was supposed to be in 7 that didn't make it to 8, and now maybe 9. But I do know that one of the things they talked about was, so let's say that you're downloading a game that is compatible with the iPad and the iPhone and iPod Touch and all this other things, but if you only have the iPhone and a specific model of iPhone, it will only download the portions of the code that are applicable to your particular device. Yeah. So it saves a little bit on that. And, I can imagine, especially with assets, you're not going to download the biggest textures because it's not coming into your Mac or your iPad or whatever. So they're kind of working on that too. Part of that too is because they took a lot of heat from the iOS update that required people to have like 5 gigs available on their phone. Yep. If you've got a 15 gig device, like 6 is taking up operating system, and then if you have any apps,
pictures or music, you're done.
Yeah, exactly. So people were having to delete all these photos and whatnot. It was kind of a nightmare for them. So it's cool to see all these companies working on these things, and it's not just about the bandwidth; it's about the practical realities of what we actually have. In terms of memory, in terms of battery life. All of those factors kind of play into that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had more time. You talk about battery life. You talk about what the usage and the brightness of the phones and how much more efficient the last 5 years phones have gotten. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, again, is code work, right? A lot of that is development work, and they've done a great job of streamlining. We actually do have a couple more minutes. Tell me a little bit about how you guys look at optimizing code. I mean, how do you really focus on trying to make your code as lean as possible, or is it more like, we're just trying to get this out the door and then we'll worry about that later on?
There's different theories behind that too and thoughts on that. Mobile, in my opinion, needs to be more lean at the current stage, although even that's becoming, again, technology is advancing. But I think you always want to have clean code. If you're not developing clean code, then it's going to create issues down the road.
Yeah.
So part of that is in the development process early, excellency and not just doing stuff. We've gone through, we clean up once every 3 weeks. I can just double check. Are we using this stuff right now? Is this not, because we had for example, in Thunder God Battles, we had a complete back-end software change. Well, we add the new company we've done, all their SDK information, work on this company called PlayFab, which great guys. And we're sitting there like, why is this? We went from 77 megs to now 126. What just happened? And all these old assets from that, SDK and all this different programming that we didn't need. I was like, guys, let's get it out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's awesome. This has been great stuff. And of course, where can people fight you guys?
ForthRightEntertainment.com. We're on Twitter at Forthright as well. Facebook, Forthright Entertainment. So
cool. Forthright Entertainment. Ryan Waller, thanks for joining us. And next week, I do know we're going to have somebody talking about software-defined networks, which should be really super fun because I think this stuff is like crazy bananas. To me, it sounds like Ultron.
Yeah,
you know?
I have a network guy. I'm gonna have a network guy because I'm like,
yeah,
I'm intimidated.
that stuff. It's really amazing stuff. It's like Ultron takes over the world. But we'll be talking about that next week. For this week, I'm Victor Agreda, and this has been Coders, and thanks for watching.
Coders is a production of RCR TV News. To reach Victor Agreda Jr. or to suggest a show topic for Coders, you can reach him on Twitter @Superpixels. For all the latest news on wireless code and the whole world of wireless, check out rcrwireless.com.